From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
And hello again. Welcome once again to Chicago Newsroom right here on Can TV. I am Ken Davis, and we're so glad you're back with us again for another week. We open today with a fantasy, the fantasy of being able to tap into Rahm Emanuel's cell phone. And you young kids sitting there in the basement who like to hack around, maybe one or two of you have hacked his cell phone, and if you have, send us the tapes because we really want to hear this stuff. The first one I wanted to hear was last week when Don Welsh, who is the new tourism chief, did that whole thing about how, you know, people are not going to want to come to Chicago. Tourism is going to fail because of all this violence in the street. We got to stop it. And then about 8 hours later, he was backpedaling so fast you would have seen him like fall off the east end of Navy Pier because presumably he got a phone call from the mayor telling him that he was wrong-headed about that and he had to correct it. But the real one, the one that I want to hear, is the phone call that happened like, maybe Sunday afternoon between Rahm Emanuel and Jonah Edelman. We've talked about Jonah on the program here before, but, you know, he's the guy who kind of helped usher through the new legislation in the state legislature, and I could imagine that call that he made to Rahm Emanuel a few months ago right from the floor saying, Mr. Mayor, we got it. We got the 75%. These teachers will never strike again because they'll never get a 75% strike authorization vote. And, you know, while I was at it, I threw in this thing with an arbitrator. So if we ever really get in trouble, we got an arbitrator. Everything's taken care of. We're not going to have any more problems with the teachers. And then the other day, the mayor called him and said, number one, you're on. And number two, well, anyway, that's a fantasy. And I know we give the mayor a hard time, but, you know, he's paid to be given a hard time by guys like us in the media. So that's the way it is. We have had a very interesting week in the realm of public schools and Chicago Teachers Union negotiations and all of that with our friend Mr. Edwin Ben, who, as you probably know by now, issued his much-awaited report and basically sided with the CTU. So a week ago, we were at a meeting at Kennedy King where the CPS decided they wanted to release their budget to the public, and they did it simultaneously at 3 different meetings with like 1 day's notice. And we went to one of them and ran into these two fine Chicago public school teachers who spoke at the meeting, and I was just really taken by these sort of personal testimonials that teachers gave us about what their life is like working for CPS. And it's not all bad. There's a lot of very good stuff about it, but it also is deeply frustrating. And when these kinds of news things break out, we tend to bring in the experts and ask what happened. We thought today the experts should be two people who are right there in the field, frontline workers. So we've invited today Kimberly Walls, who's from Fulton Elementary. Where's Fulton?
53rd and Woods, Hermitage.
Okay, all right. Well, we're certainly glad you're with us today. And Dave Stieber is with us. Dave Stieber is with us today. Dave, you're at a place called Team Englewood.
Team Englewood, yeah. It's the former Englewood Tech building in the Englewood neighborhood, right near 63rd and Stewart.
And an interesting thing happened there. It got split into two. You were telling me a little bit about this. So half of it is now charter and half of it is CPS.
The first year that I started, it had just gone through the transformation process, and now half of it is urban prep and then half is us, public school.
So you're just sharing the building?
We share it. It's pretty much divided in half vertically. Urban prep is their side, we've got our side, and there's not too much intermingling between the two schools.
And your kids all have uniforms, and they're different uniforms?
Yes, yep, different colors in the building to know which side's which, and different uniforms and all of that.
You know, I got to jump in here. This is so ironic that charters, one of the things they were intended to do was come up with new ideas and spread them to other schools, and here you have the two schools in one building and they're not talking to each other.
Right.
Are you learning any lessons from the charter
I mean, they
school?
get a lot of the media, but our data is very similar.
Yeah.
And so.
Before we go any further.
Yeah. Sorry.
No. I'm glad you jumped in. Linda Lenz is joining us today, old friend of ours and old friend of the show, and founder of Catalyst Chicago, one of the authoritative voices in Chicago about education reporting, and also years before that with the Sun-Times as education reporter. So I thought really cool. We have a couple of teachers here, and I should bring Linda in, and the two of us can talk to you about what your life is like. And I guess before we go any further, too, Kim, you should tell us your story. You've kind of, you're sort of like an urban experiment as a teacher, because you've been in everything.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. So I got my alternative certification through AUSL, which is the Academy of Urban School Leadership. And what they do is they bring in individuals who want to change careers, transition into teaching, and we work with them for a year under a master teacher, and a teacher that mentors us. And it's approximately, it could be 3 of us in a room, myself, another resident, and then the teacher. So you have 3 teachers basically in the room with maybe 20 to 25 kids, 27 at the most. And then they work with us for a year, and at the end of that year we have a master from National Louis, and then we have our certification to Illinois State Board of Education. Well, after that I went and interviewed in the Chicago public school system, but AUSL teachers are Chicago public school union teachers as well. And so I went to work at Guggenheim for 4 years, and then Guggenheim just closed this June 2012. So now I was just hired over at Fulton, which is a CPS turnaround. So I guess I got to see all gamuts of.
So you've been at AUSL, you've been in a school that was closed, and now you're in a school that is a turnaround, that is
CPS
in like
turnaround.
4 years into a turnaround. So you got pretty good perspective on all of this.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the first thing I want to get to is, Dave, you are a delegate. Yes. You are a union delegate, and there are, what, 800 or so of them or something. Now, the CTU has a credibility problem with me on this, because the CTU said yesterday that they put all of you guys in a room and 100% of you voted to reject the arbitrators thing. That couldn't possibly have happened. These are teachers. They don't vote 100% on anything.
Well, first let me go back to something you said at the start. Teachers, thank you for saying teachers are experts, because we are, unlike many people say that we're not.
Like we're educators.
Yes. And second of all, to your question, so I've been a delegate for 4 years now, and I've never seen a unanimous vote.
I don't think there's ever been one, has there?
On anything. And I mean, it was literally, we took the vote, and every single person voted to reject the arbitrator's findings. And I mean, the findings did have some positive things for us, but they also a lot of negative things. They didn't help PSRPs.
What are those?
So like school professionals, like clerks and technicians, people that work in the building besides teachers. It made the insurance go up a lot more for teachers. CPS of any major district has the highest health insurance of any teachers in the country for large districts. New York City has $0 in health care. We pay 14%, which is significantly higher. It didn't talk about class size. It didn't talk about, making sure that all schools were fully funded, that they had counselors, librarians, nurses, all these things that make a great school. And we're not getting that. And so that's why it was a 100% vote to reject yesterday.
Did you think that was as weird as I did? 100% vote from I mean, I just was kind of gobsmacked.
Given that there was 90% to authorize a strike, I'm willing to believe 100% to reject the contract.
But what they rejected, Linda, was an arbitrator who said, I kind of agree with you guys on the salary thing.
Right, but there are implications, like what would you have to cut in order to, give those salary increases? And, people were doing the math.
And, so, I mean, the math is like, well, okay, great. You're saying that we could have this nice big pot of salary, but that means we're going to lose a bunch of
something.
But we can have that salary, and we can have the class size, and that's why Karen and Jackson and Jesse are always talking about those TIF funds. And so in the CPS budget, they actually set aside money to expand charter schools. And so in my opinion, you need to take care of the schools that you already have versus trying to take money from the CPS schools and put them into the charter schools.
Not arguing about charter schools, but if you didn't give the money to charter schools and those kids came back into regular schools, it doesn't increase the overall amount of money.
It doesn't increase.
I mean, you may not like it going to charter schools, but it's not as though magically you're going to have, art teachers and counselors if there isn't money going to charter schools.
Well, it would increase like the differentiation, I guess, of students in all schools. Charter schools right now, like there's data out there that they're no better than any CPS school. And then on top of that, and where I teach, there's 4 charter schools within maybe 5 blocks of us.
There are
right?
issues with charter schools, but I don't know that it's
But and so like they're taking a lot of the kids that would go to a traditional school and kind of handpicking the kids that they want. And so in that case, a lot of those parents may be more involved with the handpicked kids because they've helped their kids along the way. So there's additional resources and things to think about when that would happen. So the money may not be there, but other things would.
But the charter schools are not creaming in the traditional sense. They're not. You don't have to test into them, right? So I mean, they're not.
You don't have to test into them, but they do apply. You do have to apply to these schools. And contrary to popular belief, those same kids that go into charter schools are right back in our classrooms later on.
Well, I've always thought about this, that this is my own phrase, but charter schools skim engaged parents more than kids. You kind of alluded to that a moment ago. If you have a school that presents itself as being harder to get into, then the parents want it and they're willing to, or those who do are willing to make the sacrifice to get there, and you end up with a school that has, let's just be blunt about it, has a kind of a higher quality of parents, which means a lot, right? I mean, that's one of the things you guys have to deal with all the time is parents who just aren't engaged with their kids' education.
Yeah, I mean, it's that, and then also too, I mean, a lot of the parents in my school, like some of them are engaged. I'm sure a lot of them want to be, but they're also working many jobs to just be able to keep clothes on their kids' back. And so it's, I don't know, it's charter schools are definitely a very interesting and difficult topic to talk about, but there's just a lot of things that the overall thing is that they're deemed to be more effective than public schools, but the research shows that they're not. And so the funding shouldn't be going there if it's no more effective. And that's what we're saying.
Okay, so you mentioned a minute ago, Kim, this notion, and I saw your union representative, Jackson Potter, on Channel 11 last night talking about this, that there's, somewhere in the neighborhood of, depending on who you believe, $700-800 million still in the TIF pot, and that they ought to break open that piggy bank and give it to you guys. But that strikes me as being a kind of isn't that almost like a kind of a Mayor Daley one-time fix? It's like you got this pot of money, you're going to give it to you guys now, you'll take care of this contract, then what happens? I mean, the bigger issue seems to me to be that, maybe I'm just, drinking the other side's Kool-Aid here, but there is a shrinking amount of money that seems to be available to government for everything that it does, because tax revenues are dropping and the political environment is such that people want to pay less taxes. So how do you deal with that sort of mega reality?
My issue is this. When we talk about the TIF funding, all we're asking for is just enough to cover this, $600 million budget or deficit that they say they have now. When you have, I'm a Hyde Park resident, and right now they're building the Hyde Park Hyatt. And from my understanding, there was $5 million in TIF funding put into the Hyde Park Hyatt. And so if you have a school and CPS wants kids to be college ready, then we have to put those funds and invest in our students the way they're investing in the Hyde Park Hyatt or the way they're going to invest. And I was just a part of a protest downtown on Lake Street where they were going to put $30 million of TIF funding into a high-rise right off of Lake Street downtown. So now that's $35 million. And I can't even get a science lab, an adequate science lab, based on the National Science Teachers Association. A science lab should have a sink. We should have our lab tables, not desk and chairs and four
there
walls.
You go again.
Yes, of course, there I go.
Right.
But then you're going to evaluate me and say that I'm not preparing my students for the science and technology of the future when you're not giving me the materials that are needed. It has to be an even playing field, and it's not. It's not an even playing field. I mean, when you all go to work, you don't buy your own printers and your own ink and your own. You don't even bring. Do you all buy toilet tissue at your school? We buy toilet tissue at our school. We bought toilet tissue. We bought cleaning products because the janitors don't have. I mean, these are serious things that we don't have. And so, when we talk about the TIF funding, we know it would not be a cure-all to the deficit, but it can alleviate. And then when I talk about how we send money over to the charter schools, these schools were originally independent, and then all of a sudden they're not independent. They need the funding that we have for our students, and I don't think it's right.
I want to try to change the subject here just a little bit because we've got a lot of things to cover today. One of the things that was discussed last night on Chicago Tonight was recall. Linda, I guess that has to do with how teachers are reassigned if they get laid off?
Right, if you get laid off because of declining enrollment or your school is turned around or whatever, the union wants those teachers to have first dibs on any openings rather than keeping it open to the world so somebody come in from the outside and get one of those jobs.
And J.C. Brizard was really adamant about that that's something that they absolutely will not, that they just won't tolerate it. They're not going to allow it.
Yeah, you know, this was actually a reform that started way back in the late 80s with the Chicago School Reform Act, and that is to give principals some control over the people who are coming into the building. And I think you can make the argument that if you hire a staff that's all committed, you know, to the same program and really gels, it can be better for kids. But you also have to, you know, wonder about teachers who are really quite fine, but maybe they're more senior, they may cost more, and you know, having them not have a chance in an opening. There may be a middle ground, but I'm not surprised that the board wants to leave it as it is.
But principals have control of their own budget, so they have to know that if I've got a choice between some, you know, less experienced teacher is going to cost me a lot less, I'm going to go with that. I might be able to get 2 teachers for the price of 1 or something like that.
Well, no, I mean, the board will pay for your basic teachers regardless of what they cost. Where it comes into play is with discretionary money. You have this pot of discretionary money, and maybe you can pay for 1.5 teachers if they're less senior, as opposed to only 1 teacher if they're more senior.
But to me, this gets into the issue of it almost seems to be sort of like the evil twin of merit pay. I know that's probably kind of a twisted idea, but the notion that a principal can essentially decide who's going to get paid more or less just by whether the principal approves of that teacher seems like a pretty crazy way of setting things up.
Well, they don't get paid more or less.
Isn't that what merit pay is?
Oh, no, I thought you were talking about...
No, I'm talking about merit pay. But I really am going to join these two together. Because what it all comes down to is, as a taxpayer and as somebody who is not associated with the Chicago public school system, one of the biggest raps against you guys, teachers and unions, is that there are lousy teachers, and the unions don't seem to do anything to protect them.
But there's this whole new teacher evaluation process coming online that was worked out in Springfield. Arnie Duncan has hailed it as a model for the country. So I mean, you know, we'll see what happens, but. That's moving
you
forward.
mentioned several things, though. You mentioned cost effective. So now, are you running an educational system or are you running a business? You can't look at
Don't
teachers
get me started on that one.
You know, you're looking at cost effective versus quality.
Right.
And when you're looking at a quality teacher, you want teachers to go back to school and get their degrees. I have 3 master degrees. Now you're going to tell me that because I have 3 master degrees,
that you're not good.
and now you don't know what you're doing, versus a teacher who's fresh out as a bachelor, and that's okay. You know, but you cannot dismiss me because now I'm highly qualified and educated, and because now you don't want to put that into your budget.
You don't understand. It has nothing to do with whether you're qualified or not. It's that you're expensive.
I am qualified.
And schools should be run like businesses.
Do you want a qualified surgeon or do you want an inexpensive surgeon? That's what it boils down to.
It comes down to like what's actually best for the kids, right? I mean, all the research shows, if you have a teacher with 20 years experience, 10 years or more experience, the kids are going to have better gains in all areas.
It's 5 years,
well,
you know.
Yeah, but
once you get up to 20, then it's not.
Well, a veteran teacher has more experience than a new teacher, flat out.
Okay.
And so, if you care about the kids, you're going to pay to make sure your kids succeed. A new teacher does not bring that in.
I don't want to beat this dead horse, but let me try it a different way. I'll speak for both of you because you won't say this, but both of you know that within your schools you can identify them. You have their names in your heads. There are 5 teachers in your school right now who are duds. They're useless.
That's with any profession.
They can't do their job.
Post-op.
That's
business.
You have your police officers, you have your doctors.
What are you putting on the table to
It is the principal's
fix that problem?
Responsibility. If a teacher is not effective, it's the principal's responsibility to go in and mentor that teacher and provide that teacher with those resources.
In the first 2 years, you can be fired for any reason as a teacher.
First 3.
So if the principal's getting into the classroom, you can be fired for anything. Wearing the wrong color shirt, it doesn't matter. So after that 3 years, the principal's had a chance to evaluate you. And then you can still be fired through a difficult process, but you can still be fired as a tenured teacher. So it's not like you can't be fired.
Right, and you can. The principal has to go through that process. It's called an E3 process.
Time consuming,
now, if you have a teacher who's not effective and that teacher has been there for 4, 5, 10 years, then you may need to look at your principal and ask your principal, why is this teacher still here? You don't need to bash teachers as a whole.
Right.
Because in any profession, there's 5 to 10% who that just may not be their calling.
You guys won a kind of victory with the arbitrator. I mean, at least the arbitrator acknowledged that your claim of working 19 point whatever it is % more hours should be compensated. But in a sense, though, there's still this kind of public distaste, I would say, for teacher salaries, that they're high, that you're constantly battling this thing. And one of the things that occurs to me is that the CTU, and Linda, you can back me up on this, we've both watched this for a long time, the CTU is in a position of power right now that I've never seen it in before, to make systemic changes in the way schools are run if they don't make this all about money, if they don't make it all about salary. Maybe I'm not making this very clear.
No, we've heard that it's not all about salary, and I believe that.
I do. It really does. Well, your vote yesterday would certainly make it a strong argument.
But also, this is a different union leadership. I would say it's a unique union leadership where they have come in thinking more about more than bread and butter issues. They see themselves, you can argue whether this is the case, as being, fighters for social justice and bringing help to kids who are, disadvantaged, and that's certainly part of the rhetoric. So I suspect they're indeed pushing for those things.
It's just that it gets really hard to get around those numbers when you see, they're looking for 30% pay increases. I'll be lucky if I get 1%.
You've covered enough teacher negotiations to know that that's all for show at the moment.
And I don't understand why teachers can't talk about pay. I mean, if you're going to make me work 20% more, I'm a new parent, my wife's a teacher, we have a new son, 4-month-old. I don't want to be away from him for free. That's offensive to me as a parent, as a teacher. And so you should pay me to be away from my kid if you're going to make me work that.
But how much?
If you're going to make me work,
let's negotiate right here.
The doctor, how much should we pay you? Or your attorney, how much should we pay you?
They can talk about pay.
They are given that adequate pay because they work long hours. Do you know how long it takes when we're at home? We have to grade. We have to prepare our lessons. Since I'm a science teacher, I have to go home, practice whatever lab I'm going to do before I model it for my kids. It takes a long time.
Stay after school, get to school early.
We have to help them. We have families too. So I'm trying to figure out why is it that we have to be put at the bottom of the barrel with, all the heroes in the country, firefighters, teachers, and police officers. We're paid the less, but we do the most.
But you know that the TV head bite gets reduced down to, is it going to be a strike?
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess we might as well ask you, is there going to be a strike?
I mean, no one wants a strike,
We
right?
don't want a strike.
We've been trying to negotiate, the union's been negotiating all along. I've got friends on the negotiating team. They've been negotiating in good faith the whole time. But it comes down to...
Teachers don't want to strike.
Right.
We don't want to strike. I have a child in CPS, I don't want to strike. I don't like being bullied.
Right.
And I will fight for my profession. There need not be more than 20 to 25 kids in the classroom to adequately educate them. And then you want to say we want to make kids college ready. To make them college ready, we have to have quality. And we're fighting for quality. So if we have to strike for quality, then we're going to strike for quality.
I think, Dave, you mentioned that your school has pretty good graduation and college entry.
Yeah, I mean, over the past, we're in our 6th year of the school, so we've only had 2 graduating classes, but over the past 2 years, our college acceptance rate for graduating seniors is 98%. But that's not getting reported. Our neighbor, Urban Prep, they get reported all over because they've got a business funder, in my opinion, helping them out. But
98%?
98% the past 2 years. We had 99 and 97. So, yeah, and that should be reported. That should be celebrated by CPS. However, why is CPS promoting the charter schools? Why is CPS not coming out against these radio ads you hear bashing teachers? They should, if they're not supporting that, they should support us and say those ads are ridiculous, they're offensive to our teachers, we don't support that. But they're letting that happen, either implicitly or explicitly with their own knowledge. And so it's just like, how can you constantly attack teachers, and then get frustrated when we stand up? Right. Manny wasn't going to give us any kind of raise until we had that 5,000 member march. And he's like, teachers deserve a raise. Here's your 2% raise.
Pretty impressive. Well, all the numbers that CTU has racked up in the last year have been unbelievably impressive. I certainly don't think any of us have ever seen anything like that. Linda, you were quoted in the Sun-Times, you get the last word, you were quoted in the Sun-Times saying Mayor Emanuel has painted himself into a corner.
Well, yeah, I mean, from what we've heard so far, he wants the longer school day as it is now set forth. I mean, you could phase it in, you could, at a number of schools. I mean, there are things that can be done. And I don't hear him, budging on that. And that creates a big financial issue.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's going to be really interesting to watch the next couple of weeks. And, as we say, the clock is ticking, right? 30 days, 29 days and counting. So what happens in the next 5 or 10 of those days will probably be very important. And we'll be on that, and we'll be letting you know what we see. Thank you guys so much for coming down and giving us so much of your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's Dave Stieber from
Team Englewood.
Team Englewood. Thank you very much. And from Fulton Elementary, Kim Walls joining us today. And of course, Linda Lenz from Catalyst. Thank you so much for being here today. You have been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a community service of CAN TV. You can find us here on cable, but you can also see us online. Just go to this address right here. You can watch the show any old time you like. And you can also subscribe in iTunes too, an audio and a video podcast. Take it on your personal portable device. I'm Ken Davis. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back next week with another show, whether you like it or not, right here on CAN TV. And thanks for watching.